Everyone's got all their fingers from 4th of July fireworks.
Sure do. Got a little nervous in Florida though. They don't really care.
Yeah, Florida's like,
They just don't. They just started launching them off like behind my family and I was like, no warning, you
Yeah.
know?
Get up at 5 in the morning and still have trouble making a 10 o'clock meeting. What does that say?
But you're very busy.
All right. So,
Very
okay, go
right-
ahead and try to share.
Very right next to you is a copy of the bylaws and the agenda.
Oh, great, thanks. Pass them around.
Okay.
Well, everybody else has got one. I think you just need.
Okay, great.
Yeah, Angie could not make it. She had a flight that got changed.
Steve's online.
Steve's online, great.
Oh, no, awesome.
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you to everybody who rearranged schedules. It is challenging getting us all here at the same time, so I do greatly appreciate everybody's flexibility. A bit later in the meeting agenda, we will revisit meeting times and hopefully try to land on something that we can finalize and not keep changing it, because I realize that's not convenient for anybody either. So would someone like to call the meeting to order?
I will call the meeting to order.
Second. Right,
And can we do a roll call?
Katie Souls.
Lori Hannon.
Bill Palmer.
Parks Thompson.
Abby Samuelson.
Very young.
Tiffany Gatesman.
And online,
Go ahead. Steve Fitzgerald, and folks, I'm in Michigan with some work, but also visiting my parents. My mom just went to the hospital. So I'll only be with us for about an hour and then I'm gonna head over.
Good luck with that, Steve.
Thank you.
sorry.
And Nick Krebs here too.
Morning, Greg. I just did a roll call, so.
I'm sure I have. Right to that point. Beckler.
Can we have a motion to approve the minutes from June 6th on the consent agenda?
I move to approve the meeting minutes from June 6th, 2024.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Sorry, we're supposed to approve this agenda first. Would someone like to make a motion to approve today's agenda?
I move to approve the agenda. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's a team effort. Oh, and it looks like we have Nick online as well.
Yep.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna share my screen. And then we will jump into the fun stuff. So first on the agenda for today is looking at the bylaws. So we have worked with Butler Snow, who was the attorney that we worked with throughout the formation of the DDA and the election process. So it's one of the areas that they specialize in. They do a lot of municipal financing. Down the road, the DDA can look at the legal counsel that they would like to hire if they want to continue working with Butler Snow or look at different legal representation. But it seemed to make sense to keep working with them through the formation piece at the beginning here. So they've put together some bylaws for us. I sent those out earlier in the week, and then again on Friday, they were posted in the agenda with just a couple small changes from what was sent out on Wednesday. I do have one other small change that I'll talk about in a second. It's a pretty standard set of DDA board bylaws. The statute doesn't have a lot of things specific to DDA board bylaws, so these kind of represent a lot of just kind of general bylaws that you would see around, governmental or quasi-governmental boards. There's a couple things specific to DDAs, but we can definitely talk through them and see if there's any areas that people would like to address or change. The one amendment that I would suggest, I was looking over them one more time yesterday, and Dalton from Butler Snow actually got back to me within like an hour on a Sunday afternoon.
Oh, geez.
But the way it was worded, the secretary takes the minutes and the secretary has to be present at a meeting. And I didn't want us to not be able to have a meeting if the secretary couldn't be there that day. So this provision that's added in yellow just allows for the board to appoint an assistant secretary or multiple assistant secretaries, and or to have staff support kind of help with minutes, particularly in the event that a secretary is not present.
Can a staff person be a secretary or assistant secretary?
They would not be the actual secretary, but it could be, taking minutes could be delegated to them. I would envision it maybe as a joint effort. We can talk a little bit more about that as we're talking about a potential IGA with the town of Fraser and what sort of services might be included in that. But the way the bylaws are currently worded, the secretary of the DDA would be responsible for kind of maintaining and overseeing these records, but would work with our town clerk or deputy clerk to do so, because the town can host those records. So that is the difference. You should have a copy of the bylaws there. So I don't know how everybody wants to go about it, if you've had a chance to look at them or not, if we want to just kind of walk through and see if anybody has any questions or suggestions related to the bylaws as they're presently listed. I can also pull them up on the screen if that would be helpful.
Just had one question, and I may not have read it correctly, but what is how many years do the treasurer and secretary serve?
They serve until, I believe it's 2-year terms. It says they're
Okay.
elected in odd years in October.
Okay.
And so the initial term for anybody that would be appointed today or at the next meeting, they would serve until October of 2025, and then after that, it'd be 2-year terms.
Might it be a good idea for you all to kind of discuss with us the indemnification section? Since we're not familiar with this, but you've dealt with it with the board and commissions and all that. I think it'd be good for us all to understand if there is any risk and how it's mitigated.
Sure. So typically this is something that our CIRSA attorney would kind of speak to, but I can kind of provide some of the general highlights. Katie, you've got some experience with this too, if you'd like to share with anyone as well. So basically within your role as a DDA board member, you have certain protections through the insurance carrier, which will be CIRSA if that's not already set up. And with that, very similar to the board members that work for the town of Fraser or the council members that with the town of Winter Park or town of Granby, as they have certain protections. So as far as someone being able to come like to accuse a board member of wrongful doing or something that, a disgruntled individual who said, you were supposed to give me this piece of land for X, Y, and Z from the DDA, that the DDA owned this piece of land and I never got it, kind of thing. And basically, as long as you're working within your role, and we can actually schedule some time with our CIRSA attorney just to have a little discussion with you, because it's very helpful as far as how your emails work, how you function within your role. As long as you're working within your role and not outside the guidelines of the bylaws, then you are protected and indemnified under your position here as a board member. If you do something that's rogue, not in accordance with the bylaws, let's say you enter into an agreement outside the DDA board has not approved, and you went rogue and you entered into an agreement with a developer on behalf of the DDA, that's not in alignment with our bylaws, and that's not in alignment with what your powers that you can do. So that's a good point. I'll actually ask Sam Light, who is our Sursa attorney, who does he's not our attorney, but he's been an attorney his whole life for Sursa and for other municipalities. I'll ask him for a basic document that we can actually walk through at the next DDA board meeting. We'll send it out and we'll kind of review it at the next meeting, just so you guys kind of have a good grasp on it. Okay, so it's a good question, Barry.
But he did say we're covered by Sursa in our role. I have a question, Sarah, on, it's just general on 1.2 purpose. Is that statutory? The language on that? I'm just curious.
Yes, that is related to what is required to form a downtown development
Okay.
authority.
Cool. That's kind
Yeah.
of what I thought.
Somewhat interestingly, if it's an urban renewal authority, as I understand it, you actually have to prove blight. Whereas with the DDA, you don't.
Okay.
You can say that you're doing it to prevent or to remediate or halt. But yeah, that is a language around DDAs in the statute.
Yeah, so general welfare of the district, that's pretty broad.
Yes, Yeah.
General welfare.
yeah.
That's good.
And again, as we get into the plan of development, that's where we'll be able to outline more of the actual purpose of this DDA within Fraser. And then any subsequent projects undertaken will have to be from that plan of development.
Sarah, just a couple quick comments. 4.5, the quorum. It sort of is, I think, assumed in this document, but I think it might not be a bad idea to explicitly say that the quorum necessary to conduct all business should be a majority of the board members present, either physically or virtually. Right up
Okay.
above, it says something about virtual participation, but I've run into a problem with that once before. So that's one
Okay.
suggestion.
Good one.
And then 4.7, rules of order. All meetings shall be conducted in a most recent edition of Robert's Rules of Orders, et cetera, et cetera. I just, personal opinion, folks, I hate those things. I get that we need a set of rules. So what I might suggest is that all meetings shall be conducted under a system of rulemaking, such as Robert Rules of Orders, as designated by the DDA, by ourselves. That gives us a place to start. But if we find over time that, you know, Martha's rules or Lockery rules or something else a little less formal is better suited, we could adopt it.
Okay. Does the
Would agree.
town have a
Yeah.
current code of civility?
We do have rules of decorum, which is more how people participate, either the board or attendees participate in the way that they must behave. The town board does not follow Robert's rules either. I think that's a good suggestion, Steve. They're very cumbersome and you'd have to take classes to fully understand how to do Robert's rules. So I do agree with you wording that a little bit differently.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that is not statutory language. Is that correct?
I doubt it.
If our town board does not, then I can't imagine it is, because it wouldn't be,
No.
but they don't have that level of detail.
I know we kind of do
specific to DDA.
Bob's rules.
Bob's rules.
Shortened,
Yeah.
condensed version of Robert's rules.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's, don't want to hold up the process, but it was useful having that and the shortened version as a reminder for how to conduct the meetings. And it doesn't really spell out just, you know, for new people that haven't run meetings before, those steps. But that the chair should always remain non-partial. That's a tough one. And that's a good reminder. So Steve,
Yeah.
I agree with you. I'm just not quite sure how we put it in here so that it's usable for us and
Right.
doesn't hold up the process.
Well, I think what we can do, if Steve wants to restate his language and people are comfortable with it, we can add something as determined by the DDA board via resolution or motion. And then
Yeah,
we can
and-
revisit.
And Katie, I
What
kind of
that is, and then
anticipated
also-
that. Oops. Sorry, Sarah.
No, that's fine. That also makes it possible to change if people decide it's not working without needing to
Yeah.
amend the bylaws.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And I sort of anticipated not trying to throw a monkey in the, monkey wrench in the system here by saying that all meetings shall be conducted under Robert's Rules of Order or another system as adopted in the future by the DDA board.
Great.
Something to that effect, just giving us flexibility.
So all meetings shall be conducted under Robert's Rules of Order or another system.
Approved by the,
As adopted by,
The DDA board. Whatever the correct, I guess it would just be board members.
Right, but the board members, and then I'm gonna add via motion or resolution.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing that we all do want to make sure we keep is the ability to have a rules around public comment and that sort of thing. Otherwise, we could get trapped into endless pontification by many people. So,
right. Thanks, Steve.
sure.
Good
Lesson
feedback.
learned the hard way.
Yeah, like to learn from other people's challenges.
All right, so you've got establishment, purpose, powers, we will need to get a CO. A board membership, this all makes sense to everybody? There's no compensation. The board chair, vice chair, treasurer, and secretary, we will discuss in further detail in a second as we talk about electing officers, but nobody sees any issues here. Like I said, we've added to the secretary, if people are in agreement, the line that allows for an assistant secretary. It's in this version I pulled up here. So the secretary and assistant secretary appointed in accordance with section 3.5 or such other person retained to provide such services as set forth in section 3.6. So that would be an amendment to what you received in your packets. Oh. Well, we'll fix that formatting. The director, so boards typically do hire an executive director or have someone serve in that role, at least as an interim basis, as you are getting set up and waiting to actually have funds to work with to hire an executive director, generally from the town. So that's something we will talk about in terms of how you guys want to proceed with that later today when we address the IGA with the town of Fraser. So initial elections, if these are adopted today, those would take place today. Regular meetings, again, a lot is left that, the actual day of the meeting, things like that are determined by resolution.
Something I just want to throw out there too, with the discussions today about the chair, vice chair, treasurer, and secretary. Just like when we have new people coming into their roles as elected officials, we'll spend time with you. Don't worry if you've never ran a meeting before. We'll make sure that you're comfortable with it, that you understand the scenarios. We'll help you with language that you may need if having to talk through a certain type of introductions to meetings. How you kind of go through the agenda, how you facilitate meetings and acknowledge speakers when they come up, how you do public comment, those different things like that. So just want to make sure that you guys know that. So if this is something that you're interested in, know that we're here to make you set up for success, and we'll work with you to make sure that you're comfortable in that role for whoever's roles those end up being.
does it say anything in there about if somebody resigns from the board, how to fill that appointment?
Yes, it says it has to be done within 30 days. They would be appointed by the Board of Trustees, or if, let me find where that is. Or if there are at least 5 members, the Board of Trustees can opt not to fill that position. And that was something starting with an initial board of 11 members. We didn't necessarily want to cement that it always had to be 11 members. Hopefully momentum and participation and the desire to be involved remains, but thought it made sense to allow for a little bit of flexibility there. I remember seeing that in there. I can't.
I think it's
see.
2.2.
2.2, thank you.
No.
It does say. Board members shall serve staggered terms and shall serve until their term ends, provided that in the event any board member after appointment does not meet the statutory qualifications to serve on the board. Such person's position shall be deemed vacated and the Board of Trustees shall appoint a new board member for the remainder of the term. Or determine that the vacancy will not be filled at that time, provided that at least 5 board members remain. Board members may be reappointed to serve a new 4-year term, and there is no limit on the number of terms that a person may serve. Board members may be removed for cause by the Board of Trustees. So we could add language to if someone resigns or is removed by cause, that related to the filling of the vacancy as well. So I'm gonna go ahead. and move this to the end.
We want to give them an option to leave them.
Um. Work with me here. Nothing more. Provided that a board member resign. They be for cause. That work, provided that a board member resign, be removed for cause, or in the event that any board member after appointment does not meet the statutory qualifications to serve on the board, such person's position shall be deemed vacated. And the Board of Trustees shall appoint a new board member for the remainder of the term in accordance with, or determine that the vacancy will not be filled at that time, provided that at least 5 board members remain. Does that work?
That still allows for the board to accept resignations.
That's what I was gonna ask, just like,
Oh, to specifically state, gosh, I don't know if that was.
like if someone had to move for a health condition, that gives them the ability to. Not that,
Right. Do we need to specifically state, though, that they can accept resignations?
Well, wouldn't that be covered, like if they had to move, wouldn't that be covered a
they can't be.
qualified
Yeah,
board
they
member?
meet the requirements, so that's what
Yeah.
we're proficient for. I think it's just the resignation piece.
Right, just if somebody doesn't want to do it anymore. So shall we add board member resignations may be accepted? Say by the board in writing. Can you approve them by motion and for the Board of Trustees, correct?
Correct, when somebody resigns. Oh, yeah,
Your motion or resolution, but just say accept.
it's actually a resolution for the board.
Right, accepted by the board in writing. Accepted by the board and approved. And Butler from Butler Snow did say he could jump on if there were things we had questions about and wanted to be able to approve them today, but I think what we've added thus far should not be an issue.
And you have a resolution for approving the bylaws?
Yes,
It could just say, upon final review for. Make sure.
okay.
Get that to the resolution.
Can we say with the amendments discussed in the minutes? And they don't. Okay.
I mean, as we're making changes to it, I think just adding that the attorney will have upon final review and approval. Attorneys.
Add that to the resolution.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, anything else anybody would like to look at?
It looks like the amendments is pretty easy if we do need to change anything. Is it really as easy as that statement? If we find something?
I mean, I think it is.
Okay.
I think ideally you try to adopt them and not need to always amend them, but
Yeah,
it's not complicated to amend them. Yeah. Yep. All right, any further discussion? Would someone like to present a motion?
Can we scroll back through this on the screen and
Uh-huh.
show the changes and amendments? To,
Yes.
so we have a final peek. Is that okay with you guys at what we're approving?
Mhm.
Great, works for me.
Yeah, of course.
Like, read this one.
Let me try to make this larger for you here. I don't know why it's not larger on the screen because it's large on my screen.
Well, bring it back down a little bit. Oh, there you go. Great, perfect.
Why it's not full screen. Okay, so for board membership, we added,
You see the strike throughs.
Start at the beginning. Alright,
the number and terms of board members shall be determined by resolution of the Board of Trustees in accordance with section 3125805. Board members shall serve staggered terms and shall serve until their term ends. Board members may be reappointed to serve a new four-year term, and there is no limit on the number of terms that a person may serve. Board member resignations may be accepted by the board in writing and approved via resolution or motion. Board members may be removed for cause by the Board of Trustees in accordance with section 3125807. Provided that a board member resign, be removed for cause, or in the event any board member after appointment does not meet the statutory qualifications to serve on the board, such person's position shall be deemed vacated, and the Board of Trustees shall appoint a new board member for the remainder of the term in accordance with section 3125806, or determine that the vacancy will not be filled at that time, provided that at least 5 board members remain. And just let me know if you want to stop and look at any of these other sections as we go. This was not actually the amendment, it's just tracking. So this one was. So this part here, secretary and assistant secretary appointment in accordance with 3.5 or such other persons retained to provide such services at set forth in section 3.6. This was the amendment that was on the PowerPoint slide. We discussed at the beginning. Once these changes are in 4.5. So Steve's changes I wrote, so I'm gonna add them here so they're all in one place. present either in person or virtually. And then the rules of order, all my meetings shall be conducted under the most recent edition of Robert Rules of Order or another system adopted by the board members via motion or resolution.
Later. Go to the gym.
Sounds good. Have
I
fun.
can't
I'll keep, you know,
Otherwise provided by these bylaws in the downtown.
if I'm gone when you get back and it's to go there, I'll leave you a note.
All right. Yeah, I'll tell you, every time she catches it, when she caught this cough,
You're not muted.
I got, he's good.
All right, I think that were all of those were all of the amendments.
Wonderful. Well, I would like to entertain a motion to approve bylaws of the Fraser Downtown Development Authority with the changes as shown and reviewed by this board.
Oh, and Katie, do you want to add upon final review of our legal counsel?
Yes. On final review of our legal counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? The motion carries.
Great, thank you. All right, moving right along, next up. Officer elections and positions. So as shown in the bylaws, a chair, co-chair, secretary, and treasurer. Assistant secretaries, as previously discussed, we can appoint at a future date or later, but don't have to be part of the formal election process. Chair elections typically will be held in October of odd number years. So this initial election will happen today. And those officers will serve in their roles until October of 2025. So the board chair shall preside at all meetings of the authority, except as otherwise authorized by resolution of the authority. The chair shall sign all contracts, deeds, and other instruments made by the authority. At each meeting, the chair shall submit such recommendations and information as deemed necessary for the proper administration of the business affairs and policies of the authority. In the absence of the chair, the vice chair can step in and perform all of those same duties. The treasurer shall keep the financial records of the authority or cause such records to be kept, and together with the chair, the director, or such other person retained to provide such services. So if you had a staff person either with the town or in the future that was hired, they would work with that person to provide these services. Approve all vouchers for the expenditure of funds of the authority. The treasurer may delegate the authority to approve all vouchers for the expenditure of funds of the authority to the chair, the director, or such other person retained to provide such services as set forth in section 3.6 of the bylaws to the extent authorized in a motion or resolution. So a lot of times the boards might provide authority that staff can expend up to a certain amount so that you don't have to approve a, $200 expenditure, something of that effect. So that's something that again could be circled back to at a future date. But the treasurer would be involved in the quarterly reports and submitting in annual reports and submitting those, presenting those to the board. And then the secretary, as discussed previously, is responsible for maintaining all records and documents and would work with the town clerk here at the town hall to do so. And would be responsible for maintaining those. So any questions about any of those positions before we?
So on the treasurers, once it gets going, if we do have a intergovernmental agreement with the town, can we use your programming for tracking money? Okay,
And that's the plan that's gonna be presented to
Okay.
start with.
Okay.
And then I think some DDAs honestly continue to do that, some of the smaller ones, but then as they have more money, that can happen independently.
Okay. So with the treasurer's position, they wouldn't just be out hanging to dry in their own office, having to do all, okay. Just wanted to clarify.
No, and yeah, when we talk about the IGA, some of the stuff is, which item do you talk about first? I would foresee this person working closely with a staff member who is potentially serving as like an interim director and with Lori, our financial director for the town,
To help make that all.
to do all of this. But I think it's important that there's somebody on the DDA board that has eyes on this as well.
course.
So that Lori's not taking your money to Mexico or whatnot,
It's a mandate. It's in our bylaws.
right? So. Yeah, so do you guys want to start with any other questions? I'm gonna start with discussion of chair.
So who's interested in serving? Who would be willing to be a useful public servant and be chair? Okay. Great, so we've got 2.
I'd like to have a thought.
Yeah.
Thought about this a lot. I think thinking back at EDAC versus this is a very unique body in that we all collectively represent an unusually wide range of stakeholders. I think we should be really careful with the chair and vice chair to make sure that we pick someone to the best of our ability that represents a really wide range of stakeholders, meaning the residents, the visitors, the businesses, the arts. I don't want to leave anybody out, the developers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think we should think about this really carefully, both in terms of anybody who throws their hat in the ring and who we choose. This is not going to be an easy position.
Well, you just scared me off.
I don't-
I'm teasing you. I wasn't
I don't mean
interested
to-
anyways.
I don't mean to scare anybody off, but I just want us to think about this really carefully.
Yeah,
With like an EDAC and like, I don't want to speak about anything else going on. It did not have such a wide range of stakeholders. So I just think we should think about it very carefully, both for somebody who wants to do it and who we choose.
Well, and I think our board, the EDAC board, has a pretty wide range of stakeholders, which is
It
good.
was, but
And board decisions
issue-
have to be
first of
made.
all, that group was only making recommendations to the board in a very narrow range. This is, and I'll stop talking. That's just one thought I'd like to share.
would it make sense for this person to be serving the 7-year term? Or does it matter?
Would
No,
not be-
in our bylaws.
Well, no one's in the
Right,
7-year
the
term? Maybe,
4-year
I'm sorry.
terms are the longest terms right
Okay.
now. This position would be reappointed. It could
In
go to the same
October.
person in October of next
Right.
year. So,
So you're not committed for
yeah,
work. I don't think there's a 7-year term.
yeah.
I'm thinking minute.
Do those interested maybe want to say their piece? And then if anybody has any additional comments to add, and then we can take a vote.
And
And then once we have a chair, they can start running this meeting.
that would be a wonderful thing.
Without guidance?
That'd be a
I
wonderful
thought they
thing.
have to have that guidance meeting.
With guidance, with guidance.
Yes.
So, and I think, yeah, why you'd like to be in that role and, the value you bring to our board.
I think for me, being the only only resident, I have a unique perspective. I don't have any stake in the game other than making this place a better place to live for everyone and work.
Can you guys hear her okay?
Yeah, sorry,
online?
can you hear me? I've been
Okay.
dealing with sinus infection, so apologies. But with my ability to manage global projects, I think I can bring those skills to this role, and also have an unbiased view on things and be able to listen throughout all of the conversations and keep an unbiased opinion on all these things. So that's kind of where I sit. Well, I'm new to this type of meeting. I think with a little bit of help, I could definitely facilitate
good discussions.
Well, I was a resident in Fraser, right? And I've been a resident in Grant County for 33 years now. I have multiple businesses here, and I think most of all, I probably have more friends in this valley than most people do combined, and speak for a lot of people. I already lead a film festival as an assistant director, and I know what that takes, and speak to hundreds of filmmakers on a monthly basis. And I think that I can speak to the entire valley here and speak for people pretty well, knowing both sides of how people feel here.
was all juice, buddy.
So knowing that some people are more reserved.
Steve or Nick, put yourself on mute.
It's Nick.
Nick, yeah, we can hear you.
Sorry, let's get enough juice.
So I kind of have like, my parents' side and, some of the people that are older that don't want to see the development, and some that are younger like me that do want to see development. And I think I have a healthy balance in between growing up here, being a pro rider at the resort and having to deal with all types of change and apply that to my career path.
There's 4 positions, so we still need a few more people.
It's hard to hear you, Antoinette. Can you pull your mic a little closer? Is there enough room for you to move it? There.
Yeah, I'm just saying there's 4 positions. That we've heard from 2 people, and I know this is for the chair. Did you just ask for the chair?
I just asked, yeah. Does anyone on the board want to share comments or thoughts?
I do. Some old people have heard development also. Just being silly. Yeah. I assume I'm the oldest one here, so.
Yeah. We
I
say
speak
that,
for
but
you.
that's good. You can own that one, Barry. That's fine.
I think so. Katie, am I?
The,
Great.
I think I.
There's no further discussion. Do you guys want to
So-
take a vote on chair, or do you want to go through and discuss all the positions before?
I mean,
voting?
I just had a question for parks. How do you feel about like capacity and scheduling? Because you did list a lot of things that you do. And I mean, I know I don't have the capacity like for holding the, that level of stuff. And if you and if y'all can decide like who would be able to, be the vice chair, like who feels most comfortable being vice versus lead?
Yeah, and honestly, I'm happy with whatever. And I do think that any position is going to need help from another chair member. And I'm willing to be that support no matter what. So, yeah, I think that there's a lot on my plate. I think there's a lot on just about everybody's plate. I think you have a lot on your plate as well. I know that you have multiple jobs.
Yeah, I have flexibility, though. That's the good part is that my jobs are very flexible, so I have
Yeah.
a capacity to move things around and make this a priority. That's kind of what I've been discussing internally with my spouse on how to make this a priority. That's really what I want to do. So.
I might just weigh in a little bit. I know both of you. I have incredible respect for both of you in terms of your qualities, people and intellect. Based on the criteria I set, which you can agree or disagree with me, I think because of Parks longevity of living here and how wide a umbrella he covers, I think that might be the best choice. But again, I know both of you, you're both very capable and smart and all that stuff.
And I'm
But that's
happy-
just one thought.
I agree. I'm happy to be like vice chair, support you as well. Like one of those, I'm just totally on board with.
Plus,
you
you're
as well.
both not old.
Honestly, same. So,
Yeah.
yeah. I can be happy either way.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
same thing.
I did like your
Yeah.
point with the optics of like, you do live here and no
I have
You
no
know,
stake in the game.
stake.
Yeah.
I don't know how
That should
optics
be
work, 'cause
great.
I haven't done enough to know if that's gonna come up, right? Which I hate to say,
Live here?
I-
I lived
Yeah.
in Fraser for.
No, I know that, I'm saying like, as in the non.
As a
non-business
business owner, as a business owner perspective.
Like a non-biased
So
perspective.
I don't
Right.
know if that would help from the, like I said,
Oh,
the
mine?
optics of other people
Yeah.
that don't know.
I would agree.
So yeah, so
Yeah.
Katie asked about my experience in running meetings. So I've been a project manager running global clinical research for 10 years. So like just this morning, around midnight this morning, I had a meeting with the director of addiction specialty in Australia. Running those meetings, discussing patient care, and I work with the FDA. I've worked with the EMEA, which is the regulatory authority in Europe, PMA, which is in Japan. So I work with all of these large regulatory agencies, running meetings, overseeing like the drug development research in general. So I do have a lot of meeting experience. It's just this format is a little bit new to me. If that makes sense.
I mean, I would say that I love the idea of you guys working together versus it be like a medley of like two people in Parks's position. Like if it was him and I, there wouldn't be enough polarity, I think, and balance in the structure. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just like
Mhm.
I would be all biased, just kidding. But like I think that the partnership would be really quality.
I agree.
Either way it works, I'm happy.
Yeah, same.
Do they have to be
My
reelected
main
in
thing is
October?
I can speak to the entire valley very quickly. I mean,
Which is awesome.
if I put out a post, if I play telephone, it's everybody in the valley will know that day.
And,
Yeah.
you know, one thing,
That's
'Cause-
what I have.
I support you both in Parks. I've supported you forever. I think you're awesome. And that
In the
connection that you
emergency
have in
room.
the community. But your impartiality, I think in the role as chair is probably really valuable. Because when the time comes for us to be making decisions on where the money's gonna go, you don't have a connection with the developer or the arts or any of that. You can be non-partial, which is part of the
Right.
job description. If we adopt Robert's rules, is the chair has to just remain non-partial. So, I think the two of you would make an amazing team. But that impartiality and like you see, you're not familiar with this format, they can give you some coaching, but.
Yeah. That's kind of where
Yeah, I
I'm
was
at.
thinking, because remember we were talking about before about having to, step out if it was affecting us.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want to have to lose, right, another business owner's
Right.
voice because you felt like you had to
Right.
withhold for those previous discussions. But again, I don't know how strict. that will
That's
be.
a valid point.
Yeah.
I don't know how
Yeah.
my businesses apply yet.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the coffee shops probably apply. I don't know about like
Yeah.
I think it's
carpet cleaning or
Yeah.
watches or any of the other ones really, but maybe.
Do you really agree with the impartiality that you were discussing? And definitely just that the chair position that should be unbiased and there's definitely a lot of specifics going on in it. However, I really like the idea of Parks possibly being the vice chair because he does have all of the connections, whereas the chair can serve more in the office, if you will, and Parks can be more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll just throw in too, sorry that, and again, I would foresee not having a full-time staff member for this, that there's plenty of work to go around. And that the chairperson would be working very closely with town staff to determine meeting agendas, help get packets ready, things like that, kind of a lot of those logistical pieces, as part of that role.
I just have a question for you guys, just to confirm, in October, we can re-elect.
Of 25.
October 2025.
October 2025. We
Right.
can re-elect.
So the same person could be reelected or somebody else could be elected. Sorry, Greg, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was gonna say, I hope both you do both roles, either whichever way they are. Are we gonna have any money before October 2025? Then I don't think it really matters if Parks is it.
True.
So-
True.
That's really bad.
Truth.
A couple things. We will be getting hopefully an initial assessment in August from the county assessor. There may actually be some increment that we could have as early as next year from newly constructed buildings, aka Coast Lake on Main. And so the information around that, I feel like has always been a little fuzzy, but that is my current understanding. Part of our conversation later as well will be whether or not the board asked for some seed money from the town to start out, both for formation and things like putting together a plan of development, making sure financials and legal stuff are in order, as well as potentially for projects. And that could be seed money in the form of the town says, we want this to be successful. We have room in our budget. Here's 50,000 and making numbers up. Or, you know, we've got some reserve funds that we could loan to the DDA that could be paid back through tax increment. So there's possibility to have some money in 2025, but it's not going to be a huge pot of money.
I mean, I think if there is money and like, I see kind of the lowest hanging fruit is like wayfinding signs, park here, go to businesses here. And so for that reason, I would think Lori being it just kind of protects you. Like anytime there's money involved, people will be like, oh, you know, biggest sign is to Parks' business or my building or something like that. But that's my opinion. If you don't feel that way, like, I just hope you both do it. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, it doesn't, I'm good with whatever.
Yeah,
really.
I think however it works out,
Yeah.
worked for me too.
Couldn't have made it any easier.
I know. I was like, is this too easy? I'm kind of curious of Katie's perspective now. Of
Well, that's-
like,
I think
terms of-
Lori, I'd like to see Lori as our board chair and Parks as our vice chair. As your support, I think you guys are making an amazing team. And I agree with everybody's comments. Keeps you have a hot seat and lets you speak more freely, which you're really good at.
Yeah, throw me wherever.
Yeah.
Better.
So I'll make a
Hot seat,
motion.
my life.
Let's see. Do we make a do we have to vote on each individually?
Get out of that.
Okay.
seat real quick.
All right. So I'm gonna take this on just because I can pass. I would like to, let's have a vote for board chair. We have 2 candidates. We have Lori and Parks. All in support of Lori. How about a roll call, please?
What do I say during the roll?
Say your name and yes or no.
Greg Beckler, yes.
This is for Lori as chair.
Tiffany Gatesman, yes.
Very young, no.
Abby Samuelson, yes.
Nick Grab, yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, we got 2.
Bill Palmer, yes.
Oh, you're
Lori Hayden, yes.
Katie Stoles, yes. Okay.
Steve Fitzgerald, yes.
Okay, now you're now the chair, so you can take over the election
All right.
process.
Okay, so you have to help me with that.
Sure.
So,
Vice chair.
so for,
Anybody else that wants to
Does anyone-
serve? As vice chair?
Do you want us to officially vote for vice chair?
Who seconded, was there a second on that motion that Katie made?
I think it was just an informal election.
Well, it wasn't a motion, it was a motion, the vote carried. There was
Right.
only 1 vote against.
Not against her, I was voting for him.
Yeah. Not really for or against,
about
but yeah. 1 for Parks and all of us and
If I knew it
Steve
was
online.
no.
Couldn't tell who voted online.
It would have been easier.
You have to figure out the
Well,
count from who's online.
It's all good.
So I think we can do a vote like that for each position and then do 1 motion to appoint all positions. Does that work?
Okay.
Okay. So for vice chair, we want to do a vote for,
I think this is easy.
Co-chair.
Can we just say all in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Aye.
Park
Aye.
Thompson as vice chair.
all right, secretary and treasurer.
Barry's got his arms crossed.
I would just say, you do not want me to be the secretary. And everybody in my family would second.
I want you to be the treasurer personally.
yeah, I actually, I agree with.
I really
with
want
you,
Oh,
That's what I
treasurer.
want you to be, yeah.
Yep.
Nick or Steve, do you guys want to be anything on this list, secretary or treasurer?
I was curious with the treasurer, do we get any kind of access to QuickBooks, or is this more like an Excel spreadsheet kind of situation, or like what kind of options would we have? Because I'm good with QuickBooks, but if it's an Excel spreadsheet, you know, it's a little bit more manual and less automatic for me, which might cause a little bit of a problem. But I'm definitely not. I'm interested in the other position. The treasurer I might be, but kind of depends on how that kind of looks. So.
And from my
Yeah.
perspective, Greg, I would say I'm going to decline an officer role. I've got enough going on with Fraser Valley Arts, my own business, for-profit boards and stuff like that.
Cool.
Nick, in response to your question, I don't think the town is currently working with QuickBooks. I think Lori on our staff, if the board would like, through an IGA, we can have her kind of do that actual bookkeeping. You would be working to kind of keep your eyes on the money and help do authorizations and things like that. Looking at reports, but would work closely with Lori and the director on that.
Okay.
Just one for myself, I'd prefer someone else be the secretary and treasurer. I actually have a vision to where I can really make a major contribution, something I'm really, really good at. That's long-term financial forecasting. I did that all my life. I'm great with Excel. I did it for my business. I'm afraid to look back to see how we're doing compared to it. But I think one of the most important things this group will be working on is doing multiple forecasts of potential revenues with all different assumptions, how it might or might not work out versus expenditures, and kind of envision me taking on a non-official role in doing that. So I think it'd be good for me to reserve, if everybody agrees that you'd want me to do that, I think that's a better use of my time.
That makes sense. Nick, are you interested in treasure? Yeah, after the explanation?
As long as I would have Barry to help me with that long-term projection, yes.
I promise.
Perfect.
Where did it land with like the format that he would be tracking? You said it was going to be internally.
We're
So
just gonna kind of play it by ear, it sounds like, and I'll be working with Lori, not Lori
Not me, yeah.
Hannon, but
Other
Lori with
Waters.
Waters. Yeah. But
they would be assigning, Nick would basically be signing checks, right?
Well, thank you, Nick. I would like to nominate Nick as treasurer
All in favor?
for the DDA.
Yeah.
Oh, you're supposed to do, no, you're.
Yeah,
You need a second, so I'll second it.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay, Steve seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Do you want your hammer?
Yeah, no.
Nick,
Thank
just
you,
clarify,
Nick.
Thank you, Nick.
thank you.
All right, so secretary.
So, I don't know, you guys had a conversation this morning
Yeah.
about minutes.
Yes.
You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, if folks are intimidated, staff can help with minutes. If that makes people more comfortable, either whether it be training and eventually handing over. Antoinette and I talked this morning about our deputy clerk, Caitlin, who's at our first meeting, maybe taking this on, so that we don't put too much more on Antoinette's plate. She keeps very busy in her role. So we can have a discussion about whether it's the secretary or staff that's formally taking minutes, if that is of concern. But you would have support from the staff, and we would hold those records here in town. You know, we can have a binder and keep them in Laserfish and post the agendas online and things like that we've been doing. So.
Well, I'm willing to take on the role of secretary.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And granted, it'll probably just be until 2025. I won't be within the district when I'm off the board, but I'm pretty sure that'll be at the end of my term, so. But in the meantime, I can take notes and then I'll get with staff. So when my mind is wandering and I haven't written something down, because we're gonna need something a little more than just action notes, I would imagine. But- okay. Yeah, I'm willing to do that.
Any other discussion?
Second.
There you go. All in favor of Katie as secretary?
Aye.
I,
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so if somebody wants to put forth a motion to appoint all of these positions,
I make a motion to approve the roles as identified in the past few votes for chair, vice chair, treasurer, and secretary.
Seconded.
Oh, so all the votes have been approved?
It was second, was it, did everyone say, everyone approved? I didn't hear that.
do an all in favor.
Yeah, all in favor.
Aye.
Aye.
Any against? Oh, did we miss anybody?
Any opposed?
None opposed.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for stepping up. All right, so next up. Just mentioned this briefly at the last meeting, but wanted to discuss an intergovernmental agreement or IGA between the town of Fraser and the DDA board. We see this as a very common model for DDAs starting out, that they are relying heavily to some extent on the town. I think I will also put forth the caveat that town is involved in a lot of projects, and so nobody is going to have a full-time position involved with this, so there will be limits on capacity. But I think it is important to have the town support, particularly as this DDA gets started and before there is a larger budget to work with to potentially maybe hire part-time, full-time staff down the road. So I've tried to kind of think through some of the different things that might be included in this IGA and just wanted to get people's thoughts look like, if there's other things we want to add, if there's things that, you know, someone wants to run gung-ho with the website and doesn't think they need support, with the idea that then we can draft an IGA that can be brought in front of the DDA board at the next meeting, and then go in front of the town board for approval. So we've already talked about Thursa insurance being part of that. And again, that's pretty standard practice that you could fall under our umbrella of insurance for the town. Assistance with technology, things like website, social media. Sarah Wick and our staff, I think, can work with the director and help out with that. Marketing, obviously things just like meeting space. You guys don't have an office, being able to print, copy, such things. I think the biggest pieces are really kind of the staff resources and potentially some seed money. If you wanted to use someone from staff for an interim executive director role, working with Lori Waters as our finance director to have her assist with the financing pieces, that kind of clerical assistance and record keeping, which again, I think is standard even for a lot of DDAs that are kind of more on their own. And then that marketing and branding piece. So with the money, again, I think there can be asked for direct contributions as we work out kind of a budget for that. And potentially another conversation could be about loan money, maybe looking more into 2025. If there's projects that the board wants to take on and feels like there's TIP that's going to be coming in, but you'd like to look at some of that stuff sooner versus later, that could potentially be a conversation as well.
What about grants?
We can apply for grants as well. I would see the executive director interim role helping with that. I will also say town has got a lot of grants right now, and so there will be some limits on capacity there.
Can we hire a grant writer
Potentially down the road.
to write to the
there
state?
is funding. I'm sorry?
So we can write grants for this, like, you know, to the state, try to apply for state grants. Cause I know there's a lot of town grants and I'm familiar with those. So I've written a number I've gotten a few of those, but for larger, grants out there, there's people that are very, very qualified for that, and they're right here in town.
I think that's something that could be written into the budget.
I think what we might benefit from being educated on would be the cost benefit trade-off of maybe, let's say the town's willing to provide grant money of X, whatever X is, seed money. And then maybe we could be educated and have a conversation. Would we get leverage out of using some of that to hire a grant writer if the town does not have time? That might provide a multiple of that. So again, I know nothing about grants, so I assume many of us need an education. But it seems like that is something that would be worthy of conversation and education.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what might be helpful if we want to jump ahead to the next slide and we can circle back to this. So some of the initial pieces of it, we've talked about the plan of development being a really key aspect of getting that on the books and adopted so that we can start getting that tax increment financing before the end of the year. Working with financial consulting and doing some of that forecasting. And Barry, we can see where you feel comfortable doing that and where it might be important to have somebody with specific knowledge of DDAs. Troy Northberg, or Troy Bernberg from Northland Financials, thank you, has been assisting with that thus far. So that is a possibility. Legal services, and then kind of the strategic technical assistance. And some of this is deciding what we can do in-house as a group and where it would be valuable to have consultant services. With some of the different proposals that we've gotten thus far and are trying to kind of look through and see what makes sense in terms of who to use for what and where there might be duplication so we can cut back. I mean, I think we're looking at somewhere between 18 and 40,000. Just for going through plan of development, legal analysis for things, things like the bylaws. The legal would also need to review the plan of development. Somebody else though is helping to put that plan of development together. We could use Downtown Colorado support to continue to do some work on work plans and strategic planning, working through the budget process. And so really trying to kind of look at the overall picture and what expertise are in-house and where it would make sense to work with those consultants and spend some money.
Do we have any examples? I glanced at some of the things you said, I haven't read it all, but we have examples of when other DDAs were started, in particular for groups our size. I mean, like Englewood, I assume way bigger than us, but what levels of seed money their towns were able or willing to provide?
Don't quote me on this. If I'm remembering numbers correctly from what I've been told, I think Eagle started with about 50,000 a year. Englewood, I think, had about 150,000 a year. And again, I think it's been structured in different ways. I think sometimes the towns have granted that money and sometimes it's been a loan that's been paid back through the TIP.
It just intuitively from two thoughts that might there. Number one, using a saying we need all help we can get. So to the extent the town is willing to provide, I think we really need it. But also, this is one of these scenarios where we don't want to make a mistake. And to the extent that they're professionals that have gone through this over and over again, and particularly with the first step, I think we really want that. The plan development. Sounds like running the gun together, done. And that is financially advantageous. But I would assume we really need help.
Yeah, and we've had initial conversations with AIRS Consulting. They've been recommended by Downtown Colorado Inc. and they've worked with a few different communities. So they have a specialty with DDAs and urban renewal authorities and still trying to do some due diligence there. Their kind of full proposal would be 15,000 and they would come for 2.5 days, do a number of meetings with stakeholders, with everybody here, planning commission, different folks, and hopefully be able to provide us a draft of a plan of development by the time they leave that we could go through. make revisions that we want, and then have that plan by the end of August to put to planning commission and then to the board of trustees. I know our county commissioner, it sounds like our technical deadline is December 10th, but they would love to have it tomorrow if possible, because it makes their job a lot easier. And being able to do those assessments with that in hand and knowing that we're starting that tip clock.
So that committee would be 2.5 days intake, and then they would publish a rough draft.
Yeah.
And how long would that take? You said like a
Sounds
week?
like pretty quick, and then they have their marketing people make it look pretty.
And that's
um,
15K.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, working with consultants is not cheap.
yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it
But the
also,
consulting world, that's a relative.
but that's a
project.
that's a speedy, I feel like an intake for that, and then you get like a pretty solid rough draft.
Yeah.
That would take us months, right?
And I know I've asked you this many, many times, but
Yeah.
what is our date to begin our master planning process for the town? Our public meetings, do we have a date set for that yet?
So they're working with staff right now. The kickoff for community engagement, there's a survey that we're looking to send out August 1st.
Okay.
And we could add some questions to that. And I actually printed out the current list of questions in case we want to take if we have time and want to take a look at questions that we could add kind of specific to this. They are looking to be at Picnic in the Park for the first kind of kickoff public engagement event later in August. I believe they're looking at the week of August. It's either August 20th or the 27th.
Okay.
I have a question. Is the only thing that's needed for the DDA to capture last year's tax assessment is get a plan of development by the end of this year?
Correct.
Could we then amend that plan of development after it's been established? Or is it something that we really need to put the time and effort into now? Or could we just kind of templatize it based off of Eagle or someone else and then change it later? Just to make sure we get our foot in the door for the
Right.
monies this year.
Yeah, and we'll dive more into the plan of development as we have time after these topics specifically, but in answer to your question, all recommendations we've gotten across the board is keep it general, make it an enabling document. You want to have flexibility within this plan for the next 30 years. And then you can have much more detailed strategic work plans and priorities and projects that can be hammered out.
But we can't
And that
amend it.
kind of work,
I don't think we can amend it after the fact.
you can amend it, but it's a process. It's got to go back
So,
in front
so
of
this is
planning
probably
commission and the board.
the biggest foundational document for this body. You want to make sure that it is, I think, fairly comprehensive, does cover a variety of topics. It is an enabling document, not a restrictive document. There are some DDAs that have placed more restrictions as far as how funds can be used. But something that we talked about as well is actually looking at, she was talking about this like work plan that you can just kind of refresh every year. And then maybe it's like a 3 to 5 year work plan that's just kind of updated every year. But it still allows the ability, like for the DDA, just like for our town board, to be able to take advantage of opportunities as they may come up. If there's an opportunity for a land acquisition, or there's an opportunity for working with a developer on a development deal, or some type of event, bringing that to the downtown area, you want to have that flexibility in there. So this is very much the document that you need to start the clock for the tax increment financing collection. You want to have it in place. You want it to have a pretty good level of due diligence done to provide a quality document that you can reference, because it does speak to the credibility and the reputability of this board, and I think the town in general, and for our downtown, that you want to have a good this plan of development kind of showcasing what are some of the different opportunities that we can look at in our downtown that these funds could go towards that makes sense for the DDA to fund. And a lot of it will be working, with the town of Fraser as far as funding projects and getting things going, right? So yeah, I think the work plan will probably be something that we can get some more specialization from the comprehensive plan folks who are doing our comprehensive plan update with the town.
That's right.
In addition to just your own knowledge as far as like project priority management, what do you guys agree makes the most sense for projects? And getting things going. But at first, I looked at the plan of development to just be a very basic document, but I think diving into it a little bit more, it seems to be having a comprehensive approach to it that is enabling, but does cover a lot of details as far as what can be done, really speaks to, I think the public's desire as far as them passing this as a ballot initiative, that there is a comprehensive, there's a good plan in place for this plan of development. And the work plan that's updated, every year is very complementary to that plan of development and kind of shows like, here's the vision, here's what we're really going for. While being an enabling document, I think is the key. And I think having some professional expertise to do that and do it well and do it timely has some value, because you definitely want to make sure that you have this in place. You're allowing time to go through the planning commission process, the town board approval process to get this clock started as far as when you can, get your tax increment funding done towards this body.
Can I wash this out into more of like a big picture to understand all the different plans? Just because I'm curious.
Yeah.
Because there's the comprehensive plan, then there's the work plan, and then there's the plan of development. Which one's the leading document?
So the comprehensive plan is a town of Fraser document that typically that's like a 3 to 5 to 10 year kind of planning document that talks about like annexations. It's going to talk a bit about our downtown for sure. What are some circulation opportunities that we could look at, parking, addressing some of the challenges and opportunities that Fraser has, as long as looking outside of our current town boundaries and, like I said, annexations and different things like that. That'll be a big part of that. And that's the document that town updates like every 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
The plan development specific to the DDA. This is your baby. This is like the DDA. Plan of development is your guiding kind of principle as far as what types of projects the DDA wants to do. And the work plan, I think, is very much like, here's our plan of development. Here's our work plan that is in alignment with our plan of development, but it takes advantage of, here's the project priorities that make sense. And these are where the funds are going to in the next 3 to 5 years.
And then is there any other documents connected to EDAP?
EDAP?
Or the Economic Development
Advisory Committee?
Yeah. Is there any other documents?
DDA downtown to us?
No, there's another, the Economic Development that's been meeting.
Well, so the Economic Development Advisory Committee is something that Barry was on before.
EDAP, sorry.
Right now, we've been hitting pause on that right now, just to see, kind of get this thing up and running, especially with Sarah's time, and looking at getting this going, getting the focus here. We think we'll have a lot of good representation with stakeholders through this committee, and may be able to accomplish the same goals that EDAC was working on as well. In addition to being able to actually put funding to some of those goals as well, and working with the town as far as like getting their annual approvals for their budget for the projects they want to do. So right now, EDAC may be something that is phased out. We're just not sure right now. We're really looking to get, a lot of it's about getting input from local businesses and getting some recommendations as far as things we can look at in our downtown area, which is very much in alignment with this body as well. So right now we've hit pause on EDAC, and we'll look to revisit that kind of once we get this thing up and running.
Okay.
But there could be other financial policy documents, things related to operating and working strategic planning. The only things that are required, so we kind of see them as priorities, that plan of development. And then before the end of the year, we'll have to present a budget to the Board of Trustees for approval. So having some idea of priorities to be able to create a budget.
So we wouldn't be reviewing and using anything that EDAC has done to like implement into what we want. We want to stay completely separate and not really absorb much of that legwork you've already had meetings about.
So the EDAC kind of worked, and Barry can speak to this too, obviously. EDAC has worked as very much a advisory committee to the board as far as like for things like, we're working through an economic development incentive package that makes sense for the town of Fraser.
I just feel like being involved with a lot of economic development years past, it was always about like, bringing dollars like through 40, like into hot sulfur, into Kremling. And so I think some of those visions are really important. Although we're talking about downtown Fraser, right? There's still that corridor, like how can that signage and that big vision of Grand County as a collective be implemented into downtown Fraser. And I think some of that information is important, right? That's where my brain's going, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To like download that data and
Yeah.
keep that implemented and strong within what we choose to do in downtown Fraser.
So while the DDA is not, they're not an official advisory committee to the town, we will still be looking for you guys for input for things like wayfinding signage. So
Right.
we're looking like, right now, we're looking to partner with the town of Winter Park and having uniform signage off of the Fraser River Trail and off of
Yeah.
Highway 40. That's very much the same. So you know where public bathrooms are, you know where public parking is, you know where EV charging stations are, you know where the shopping and the retail and the major trail, you know, the signage to and from the trail is right there too. So we're kind of kicking that off. But once we have some substance to that, we definitely want to be coming to you guys as a body for input to pass along to our board as well. So while you're not an official advisory committee, you're very much your own thing. We're looking to support you through this process until you have your own funding and legs. But definitely be looking for input from you, as well as you guys working with the local business community to get input on these topics as well.
Okay. So that reels us back to 4D, discussion on IGA. Sounds like we need an IGA with the town of Fraser. And at this stage, it'll be fairly open. If you have something that you could draft to bring to us that the town sees as future that we could take a look at and include the insurance indemnification in that IGA.
Yeah.
Cersei said they'd cover us, but you know, we'll just, since it's under the town, we'll just make sure
Right.
we got that dialed in.
To be redundant, given the time frame we're under and this being new to everybody in this room, to the extent that the town has the ability and willingness and hours to provide support, that would be unbelievably critical and helpful, as well as maybe having a conversation about, back to the chart that was up earlier, what kind of seed money would be available in order to get this really moving quickly and doing it right.
And to hire the consultant that
I think
specializes.
it'd be
in-
really unwise to not hire a consultant that has led a team like us that really doesn't know a lot yet through this process and get it right. And to make sure we do things like make it, you know, narrow enough. I meant wide, not using the right words, but
Yeah.
broad enough so that it's a living document that goes on forever. And we can amend it with updates. I think when I was looking through one of them, it was an update. I wonder if you can go back, talk about the time frame that we might be able to engage a consultant.
Yeah, so one of the things I wanted to ask, the consultant with AIRS has availability to come up the week of August 12th. We don't have the dates defined. He envisions about 2.5 days. He said probably earlier in the week would be best. I just wanted to make sure there'd be kind of a series of meetings, workshops. Not everybody would need to be involved in every single one of them, but want to make sure half of the board isn't out of town that week, kind of thing.
I would just, not to cut you off, I don't know what a plan of development specific to a DDA even looks like. So I always hesitate to hire someone before I know what deliverable I'm even asking for. So I think it might be a good first step. If there are DDAs that we all are say, hey, that was a successful one in Eagle or Buena Vista, wherever those successful ones were,
The plan
and look at what their plan of development was to really understand what we're asking for. Cause like in my mind, I immediately went to like a comprehensive plan, which I was saying, you know, 15 grand, 3-week turnaround, awesome.
Yeah.
But that doesn't really sound like what a plan of development is. It more sounds like a very broad kind of starting document for people to come and say, okay, it fits within these bounds. And then we have these more specific plans that guide where money goes. So personally, I'd just like to see.
Yeah, if you want, we'll go through that. So we're not actually signing off on anything right now. I just, to be able to keep having those conversations, wanted to just check on that date range. For people.
And
I
right now
agree.
we have
I don't know.
a meeting on that Monday, the 29th, tentatively scheduled, so that would be before the 12th.
Right, so the idea is
So
that
if
proposals
Need
would be.
be is maybe to say, I don't know if we can just put them on hold until after we've had a chance to meet again and really take a look, like you say, to
What's
see
on
if
the
we
29th?
need them, the service, their services or not.
What's the meeting on the 29th that you're discussing?
Right now, well, that's later on the agenda, or earlier schedules, but I do have on my calendar, I got whole tentative DDA board meeting,
Oh, I see.
tentative on the 29th.
Yeah, we had talked about that as if we needed 2 meetings this month for that
Yes.
to be the second
Yep.
meeting in July. Yeah.
I'm not sure I totally understand what you're saying, and I may have a very opposite view. But I think we really need professional help.
100%.
And a thought that occurs to me as we talk through this, what we might ought to do is have a classic brainstorming session before we meet with a consultant, where we all spend a lot of time thinking through what we, after looking at some other DDAs, what we wanted to accomplish, and we'll do it typically, everybody gets to come up with one idea, you go around, you get another idea, and just make a list of what we think the full range of priorities are, opportunities are.
That's
and
what you're
maybe-
saying, right?
Yeah,
Sorry to
that's-
cut you
I'm
off.
just
That's what you're
saying
saying.
that
Don't
first.
spend
I'm
the money yet. Yeah.
saying
You don't want to go into debt before you have money.
And really to
Correct.
understand what the DDA plan of development is.
Yeah.
So like, what are we?
What
putting
the whole
for?
document is.
Because we just
Yep.
need to be able to.
I like to
hire
know what I'm paying
consultants,
people
which
for, for sure.
I agree with hiring consultants.
Yeah.
I just think you need to be very narrow on what their scope is and targeted and what they're there to deliver.
So maybe we.
I don't know what they're delivering yet, so I
And
just
in-
want to know that.
And
I
in
mean,
order
we-
to
Hold
get
it
the
up, but-
opportunity to make the money from the state or the county, right, we have to have that submitted. So it
Yeah,
would like
so we
cost 15 to make what, 50?
Yeah.
Or
it's gotta
maybe it
be-
costs 50. I don't remember the layout, but
Well, if you want, we can move forward with the agenda. If you guys are okay with making a motion that we will prepare an IGA agreement, if everybody feels comfortable with that, and we'll plan to bring that back in front of you for approval on the 29th, and then we'll bring that to the Board of Trustees at their August 7th meeting.
Can we get a example from, say, Crested Butte or something, another resort town?
Yeah.
It's like close to resort.
Are you talking about the IGA?
Yeah, like let's read plan of development. Can we
Okay.
read other plan of development?
Yes, so we're gonna move into plan of development now. I just want to make sure we
We're talking
wrap
about
up
the.
Okay,
with the
sorry.
The IGA is an
conversation.
intergovernmental agreement.
Got it.
Yeah, so I'd like to make a motion that the town move ahead with drafting a IGA for our downtown development authority.
A second. All in favor?
I,
I,
Lori, did you get that?
Okay.
I did.
And would you say the next town meeting's August 7th?
Yes, there's
Okay.
there's a board meeting this coming Wednesday, and then the next one after that will be, do I have the right date? August 7th? The first Wednesday in August.
Has the board had any initial conversations about potential seed money yet?
The board authorized money in their budget last year for formation of the DDA. We have not, other than maybe casual conversations, had formal discussions
Have we
of seed
used
money
all that money
infrastructure. I don't believe so. I think there's a little bit left, and we've been using that still to, pay the attorneys to do the bylaws and things like that. So some of those contracts we've kind of signed off on, like DCI fulfilled their portion and they were paid for that. Troy, I know there's still room in some of the budget that we signed off with him as well as with the legal team.
But not enough money to do the plan development.
No, yeah, we need to get some more.
Not to put the cart before the horse, right? But is there other things, or if you guys think about it, are there other things that the town either has maybe information on or a start of something that would be a natural for, this organization to take up?
In terms of like current projects?
Yeah, or
Yeah.
anything that the town was like, oh, this would be, if this was, 2 years in the future, right? The DDA would be all over this. They would fit right in, you know, to
Right.
their scope.
Yeah, I mean, we're working on signage, which is Barry knows, some would say it's been a long time coming. So that's something that some signs are being ordered and should be appearing shortly. But I think there will be additional room for that. We can see how the DDA might fit into our Clayton Court Main Street infrastructure work that's going on there. We have some grant money, but it's not enough grant money to complete the whole project, we are finding. I think our small business enhancement grants that we've talked about and business incentives that will be coming back in front of the board, hopefully in August, that some of you attended that workshop where we discussed that. When was that, June?
Yeah.
I think that's another conversation we could have between this board and between the trustees, if this was something that we wanted to give over to the DDA in some form or fashion.
I'm just trying to think of specific
Yeah.
examples while we're thinking about this plan and stuff of stuff that may already be in the works. That's just easier for me to, you know, think about how
Right.
it relates.
Yeah, and some of that comes up in this plan of development discussion. So if we want to real quick cover our regular meeting schedule, and then we can spend the rest of the time talking about plan of development and diving into that. Last time it seemed like either Monday or Tuesday mornings from 10 to 12 worked best for the group or could be made to work for the group. We'd gone with Monday because that facilitated a little more participation from board members. I kind of realized afterwards that Mondays might not be as ideal from a staff perspective in terms of staff support. Caitlin doesn't work on Mondays, so if she is helping provide those clerical aspects and help with minutes, she wouldn't be able to do that on Mondays. We bring Sarah Wick in to talk kind of about some of the marketing website logo pieces and things like that down the hall. She also doesn't work on Mondays. So I guess I'm going to propose that after July, we go back to that Tuesday from 10 to 12 and maybe look at this at Tuesday of the month for a regular meeting. And if we need special meetings as we're putting this plan of development together and kind of some of these initial ones, that we plan on the 4th week of the month.
It's Monday and Tuesday, what most people, unfortunately, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, I'm usually in Denver. If I have to go to Denver for work, but if everybody else prefers early in the week, I can call in almost anytime.
Yeah, based on the polls that we had sent out, and I want to be accommodating, but I want to try to not rehash again.
Right.
Monday and Tuesdays mornings seem to be
Okay.
what most widely works for people. So would Tuesday mornings from 10 to 12, or we can do 9 to 11. I feel like 10 worked better for people. Tuesdays moving forward, starting in August.
Does everybody
That's
want
good,
to be that late?
I mean, I love 9 o'clock,
I-
but
it-
that's
Yeah,
just,
nine's pretty great.
I have a meeting at 9, but I can
Oh,
be here
that's
at 10 on Tuesdays. 10's perfect for me.
I'm okay with 10, but fine too.
I prefer 9, but I'll
I can
figure it out.
I can make my schedule work too. So 9 o'clock, if everyone's more amenable to that, that's totally fine too.
Better, okay. I think Angie had a preferred 10 to 9, but it sounded like maybe she had to reschedule that meeting anyways if we were
I can ask
meeting at
her.
10. Okay. Why don't we double check with her if 9 to
I can work
11
around it.
works?
I just,
Okay, but you'd prefer 9.
yeah, because I'm always out and about delivering.
Okay. So why don't we shoot for Tuesdays 9 to 11? I can follow up with her and then we can have a motion at the meeting on the 29th to set it for the regular meetings for the second Tuesday of the month. From 9 to 11, if she confirms she can make that work. Otherwise, we will do 10 to 12 as the backup. And then if you all want to tentatively plan for a special meeting, the 4th Tuesdays of the month through kind of September, October, as needed. I can send this all out in an email.
Yeah.
That would be fantastic.
I just, I want to try to get you guys out of here, close to the time we've said it's gonna take and I want to be able to, okay. I was planning to spend a little bit of time with tax increment financing and just making sure people understand it. I can do that real quick and we can circle back to that because I think that plan of development piece is the priority. And there's a lot that's kind of fluid around tax increment financing right now in terms of the different ballot measures and how that might play out. This graph was presented last time. But again, just the idea that once we submit an approved plan of development, they take the baseline property values for where things are at. They would expect a certain amount of growth kind of with the market. But new construction or new development within the DDA boundaries that can be seen as happening in part because of this catalyst development and having a DDA, that's considered tax increment. So as things are built along Clayton Court, that increase in property tax value from the base value of the property to what is built should go to the DDA. Other improvements, it's a little more questionable what gets given to the DDA and what is not. There was a recent court case this past year with Aurora in which that was kind of litigated. Some interpretations have been that any increase beyond a certain market increase, kind of comparable to what's going on elsewhere, should go to the DDA. My understanding is what was decided in that case was that it has to be tied to new or redevelopment. But maybe there's still some sliver of tax increment, some percentage that the county assessor is giving us. So I would like to hopefully in August have the county assessor and perhaps Troy Bernberg do a session with us all to kind of talk and look at what the county assessment looks like and what kind of that projected tip is once they have that for this year.
And this is an increment based on not just things that are tied to the DDA initiatives, but also just the town initiatives as well.
My understanding from talking to our assessor, the way she's looking at it, because part of the issue has been that there's been variation with how different county assessors have been doing this. If we build something new on Clayton Court, even if the DDA in the town hasn't put in infrastructure, the DDA is getting that. There's room to argue for increment that's coming in different places based on the town or the DDA putting in infrastructure, doing things to try to attract development.
So like all those lots on Clayton Court, for example, if you put in 9-foot heated sidewalks, collector road, parking right in front, those lots are much more valuable than they were a year ago. Is that increment going to go to the DDA because of the infrastructure being put in, even though there's not something built on the land?
Yes, where it sounds like it's we're less likely to get increment that previously people were getting increment for is say we go put in heated sidewalks in front of Sharky's and Sharky's value goes up. That is where it's become questionable if we get that increment or not, because Sharky's is staying the same. Or if I'll just keep using Sharky's, a giant fancy hotel goes in across the street from Sharky's, which I don't know where that would be, but we would get increment from that hotel if it's within the boundaries. Let's say Sharky's value goes up because of that hotel, they're not necessarily giving us that increment.
But they would on raw land.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, where that hotel is being
Is
built.
this really different from what we heard several months ago? Because I thought everything in the DDA from the day you establish it. So if Sharky's value was $1 million and the next year it's $1,100,000, I thought the DDA got taxed on that 100,000. What we learned months ago.
That has been challenged in court, and that is something that different assessors were doing differently.
So this is new from what
was discussed last fall, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
And there's legislation coming forward that could put caps on some of this as well. But what everybody seems to be pretty clear about at this point in time, something is developed on Clayton Court, DDA gets that increment.
So that's the biggest leverage that we're looking at for the timing of this DDA is because of all the new development coming onto raw land. I mean, you know, Greg and his team did a development for those 2 buildings there on downtown. We're looking at putting this in place that allows to capture that increment as well. In addition to just planned development along Clayton Court and just different areas of town that are currently just raw land. So that's a huge benefit right now for our timing of this and these different things working together. If you look at like the Eagles DDA, they've gotten one building torn down and redeveloped, and they're already built out, and they've had some struggles with getting that tax increment funding going. But right now, with the way that we're currently kind of, ready to go, it's a benefit for this timing to work right now, because we are looking at this future development that's going to occur. That's very much going to be the momentum, hastened by the efforts of the DDA.
If Sharky's redeveloped their patio, would we get an increment on that or no?
I feel like I've used that almost exact example. My understanding is currently no, that our assessor would not look to give us that. If they add a second story, then we probably would get it for that. So there's some threshold that is not clearly defined from where it's considered just an improvement and where it's actual like redevelopment.
But weren't we talking about giving small businesses redevelopment dollars from the DDA? No.
Yes, we could
Okay.
still, from that tax increment financing, have a program similar to what the town currently does, where Sharky's can apply for money to get a patio. We just might not necessarily get, say their property value goes up because of that patio. We may or may not get any increment. It sounds like the assessor gives us a certain percentages increment kind of across those different properties within the DDA, but they have some level of threshold. New construction's easy. We get the new construction. As to where it becomes, where it's considered redevelopment, that we would get the increment from.
Maybe the most confusing part right now is what we were told months ago was that the inflation in the property value was part of the increment the DDA got. Are you now saying the inflation in the property value just from normal time does not go to the DDA?
For new construction, we would continue to get that property value that
But
comes out of
existing-
it. But my understanding is if Sharky's property value goes up,
Right.
just because inflation went up by 10%, that we don't get that.
And that's different from what we were told a year ago.
Yes.
Are these from the new things that are going to pass? Or is this
No.
nothing to do with, okay.
So, and I'm gonna try to kind of skip over some of these. I'll get to the legislation in just a second. So the idea is that with tax increment financing coming in, you potentially can bond against that. You can get a loan against that. You could sign a developer agreement. So for example, with lots that are set to be developed on Clayton Court, one of the things that's been talked about is kind of really enhancing that river walk along the Fraser River. Potentially a developer could do that work on town property with an agreement that as we get that tax money from their property that goes to the DDA, that the DDA pay that back to them. So that would be an example of like a developer agreement. The developer agrees to do something beyond the scope of their project and their land that's, a public enhancement, with the agreement that once we're getting that property tax, the DDA is getting that property tax from that property, that they get paid back for that work, for that investment. So that potentially could be a way to see some projects sooner versus later, versus waiting for everything to be built out and have that tax increment financing coming in. Bonding is possible with some projects, but it seems like you need a pretty good catalyst project that's actually going to be generating revenue to make sense to do bonds.
How much raw land is within the DDA at the moment? Besides Clayton Court?
Can I come back to you with the answer for that?
Yeah.
I don't have that on the top of my
Okay.
head. That's a good question.
So I can just kind of talk to a few of those areas. So you have the piece of land next to the Lions Pond. You've got the piece of land next to the Holiday Inn. You've got the land next to the Baptist Church over here. You guys know where that's at? We obviously have Victoria Village. Pretty good chunk of that's likely going to be property tax abatement. So they won't be having property tax on at least a majority probably on that property. If we look at the ownership piece, that's something we'll discuss later on. But there are looking at some commercial components on that land as well. Yeah, Ron Anderson's got a couple of lots. I mean, there's definitely land available to be developed.
And then there's the redevelopment.
redevelop. And
So
then,
there's a
you know,
lot
the
of
kind
older
renovation
places
thresholds and additions,
that-
you know, going vertical.
Yeah,
things of that
that
nature.
eventually are gonna get knocked down and replaced.
Those don't sound like priorities though. Like it almost sounds like the assessor can choose, you know. It just sounds like redevelopment would be lower on the totem pole.
I mean, if
Well,
somebody's
if it
completely-
happens, we get the increment off of it.
Well,
Yeah.
couldn't
Like if
you work?
somebody's completely rebuilding something, like I would say there's a lot of lots within Frazier's core downtown near Clayton Court that a financial economic development person would tell you are currently being underutilized, right?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
vans are being stored there. So if the owner decides to sell that or develop it, that is increment that we would get.
I see.
You know, if there's currently just a shed for storage, we're gonna get
Versus-
the increment from the development that happens on those properties.
I see.
And it's
Versus
a
the
balancing act,
function.
right? Like right now, we're focused on money in, right? But more established GDAs, then they have the money to be able to do events or add some nicer parking or other things that really help out everyone. It's just you got to have the money first, right?
Right.
So we can work with the board though to make, to advise or ask for the board to make different, I don't know if code is the right language, but if you go to Frisco, things have to look a certain way. So they have to be redeveloped. So if you went to the board and you said, this part of Fraser looks like trash and it needs to look a certain way, and you would be helping your DDA, so therefore we can get all this done. Now we're leveraging the board to help us get redevelopment done. Is that correct?
I mean, a lot of times I
Maybe.
feel like when stuff is rezoned, certain properties are grandfathered in. There are options to make things happen that I think would
So
be delicately
something that some
approached.
communities do that Avon actually, when we did our board
There's
retreat
always
there,
that.
talked about was a redevelopment plan. So they looked at updating the zoning in certain areas so that when redevelopment occurs, that it has to meet certain, like it could meet certain design guidelines or certain
Right.
types of compositions of the actual building itself. So that's where your leverage is. You know, right now, if you have a building there, it's grandfathered in based on that type of building. So, you know, we have buildings in our downtown that are no longer part of they don't meet our current zoning code, but because they were built, you know, when the codes went in, they were approved at that time and building permits were issued, they were allowed to build that building. So when zoning changes, which dictates what you can do in certain pieces of Fraser, you know, it applies to once you actually go to renovate, do a major renovation or an addition, or just a tear down and rebuild. So like in Avon, for example, they had a redevelopment plan for where they have like an old Walgreens kind of thing. And when you look at other areas of Avon, it's pretty tall. And Walgreens is a one-story building. So their redevelopment plan is when you go to redevelop this, you need to do at least like so many stories. They can't just do a one-story building there. But that's just Avon, for example. That's not a Fraser's now code.
And I think, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there's too much of an issue with new development or redevelopment not looking good or taking place in a way that people generally like. It's more of an issue of just blight and people not doing anything on their properties,
Right.
I think,
And
which we're kind of already set up to prevent through the DDA itself, I think.
From here forward.
From here forward.
But
yeah.
you can incentivize, we can't, but maybe we can, you know, work with the board to incentivize those people to redevelop. And even if it was on grant money, we would then get that increment of, you know, the property value increase.
Yeah, I mean, I think the town has disincentivized or kind of created by changing like the new Riverwalk district, for instance, like you have to develop on that, where that picture is, you have to develop retail facing Clayton Court, you have to develop retail facing 40. So I think by doing that, the town has limited what they can do that's kind of lower hanging fruit, easier money to make, and push them towards selling or redeveloping in a way that is kind of in line with the town's goals of mixed use development. But I don't know how we'd incentivize those owners to develop anything meaningful with the amount of money we're going to generate in the first
Yeah.
5 years, you know?
Right.
If we did 10 more of those projects, that'd be like 400 grand a year.
You'd
So
have to
like,
have grant
Yeah.
money. Absolutely. Well, that's what it
Well,
would
and the
be.
hard thing about grants too, let's keep this in perspective, we're not a 501c3. So it's a little harder to find the grant dollars, I
Yeah.
think. So that's just something to tuck away.
We can do a separate session as far as like here are the grants that could be available to the DDA.
Down
and
the
town
road.
can support. I
It-
mean, and you know, the
We can find money when we need.
yeah,
can
and
also
the town of
partner.
Fraser, you know, our board of trustees is going to continue to work and revitalize downtown. They're still going to do their downtown projects and their projects throughout town to help, you know, continue to encourage economic development, spur that growth. So, you know, the plan of development will very much kind of be helping with kind of like, okay, here's what makes sense for the town. How can the DDA really be at most effective with their funds, with your outreach and your input? How can the DDA be the most effective to address its goals? So that's what the plan of development is really going to really be spurring a lot of these conversations about, you know, what do you want to see in your downtown? We'll make sure that you have several of these plan of developments that you can kind of look through and get an idea what they are. And then we'll have those conversations and kind of a workshop atmosphere, like what do you guys want to see in your downtown? And some of those things will go to help with the town's initiatives as like an informal advisory committee. And some of these things will actually be funded by the DDA itself, once you guys get some funding behind you.
We can fundraise, right?
I believe so.
I think we can. I believe I read that.
Yeah, and one of the things
That's what
the DDA board could look at in the future, or additional people in the community could look at. A lot of entities do have, or towns have, a DDA board, and then they have a nonprofit entity, and they can work together.
That's what.
Because then that nonprofit entity is eligible to receive those grant dollars that need 501c3 status. The example that is always thrown out is if there's an event that's put on jointly, the 501c3 can apply for a liquor license if you want liquor.
You
So,
just, that's a fiscal sponsor, right? Just get a fiscal sponsor as an.
or you just partner with them. I mean, the DDA could potentially work with Ground Foundation as a fiscal sponsor. The town has done that before for money that has to go to a 501c3 status, but these partnerships between like a downtown merchants association kind of thing, or to improve, you know, whatever you want to call it. There's some advantages in that a 501c3 can do certain things, like access certain grant dollars that the DDA can't.
Or if we wanted to say like have a farmer's market once a week, all summer long. And the event would be called such and such, and they would partner with the Grand Foundation and we would then receive. Because
I
we
think-
own that event.
Right, but if you had an entity, like your downtown merchants, right now there's a group that's actually putting on, I think, 3 this summer. If they wanted to formally become a 501c3 and the DDA partners with them, they receive the money and you jointly put the event on.
Okay.
Yeah,
Or they
and we should remember, we have some 501c3s like Fraser Valley Arts that are in the DDA, so it may not be the place where we want to have the sort of permanent foundation arm. But if it's for an event or something, we might be able to leverage either my not-for-profit or others.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think as we have those priorities, those are things we can look at if it makes sense to.
Right.
Yeah.
Clearly, you can see I want to bring money to the DDA right now. So.
Yeah, I already got a plan right here.
Yes.
Yeah, right?
I do have a question of how, I don't know, this probably doesn't segue. So if anybody wanted to continue on that, I don't want to interrupt.
No.
So I was just curious of how this crosses over into residential stuff. So, you know, the street that is parallel with the tracks right there.
Railroad.
Yeah, Avenue. And then I guess the front part of Mill, I don't know, maybe that's Doc Suzie Avenue. And like, how do those residential streets participate in the DDA? If that makes, because none of those are businesses. Because I see like one of the biggest priorities of Blight is the sidewalk and the continuation of the sidewalk for safety concerns. My brain always goes to safety. I'm going to blame that on Katie, safety souls. But it really does. And I mean, because I live right there up
Yeah.
in Divide Forest Complex, and we have the 2 kids and we're outside all the time. And so I've been doing a lot of like groundwork intake and just talking to whoever.
Right.
And I was just wondering, like, how does that connect? Am I just missing it? how the funding works, if it's HOA stuff and then you have the
Yeah.
railroad.
So that is a
railroad.
great segue into the plan of development. If within your plan of development, you have connectivity and improving walkability, multimodal transit, things like that within your plan, then the DDA could use funds to improve sidewalks.
Perfect.
Even though those sidewalks aren't directly connected to a business because they're within the DDA
And
boundaries.
then there's no increment gaining from that.
No,
Like there's no
Not
gain.
I think some of the ideas though.
Sales tax,
Yeah.
but not like,
That's why I brought it before, because yeah, depending on where it comes from, but it's also like hard, because you know that's gonna help out.
yeah, Airbnbs and connect, yeah,
Right.
like.
I
Shark.
mean, it's improving the downtown by improving that walkability and connectivity piece.
Can you gain from parking? Like parking structures or parking?
Yeah, and how do you
Parking
like,
structures are always presented as the tricky one, because people want them. Somebody recently posed the question to me, is it a $30 million problem? You could use TIF towards a parking structure. You're not likely to generate much TIF from a parking structure.
but like say a resident, like, I don't know, there's that weird cabin thing right off of the railroads. Like, how do you, I guess you can't tell a homeowner to improve anything. You have no right there. But I don't know where I'm going with that. But doesn't, like, you can't put a sidewalk right off of that road because it's owned by the railroad, or maybe there's a land thing I'm not familiar with.
Easement.
Yeah, the easement, their property.
The town owned right away east of the railroad,
Yeah,
that's town owned right away.
okay.
So
I'm
if
getting
it's town owned,
specific.
we can do it. If the railroad owned it, then we would need an agreement with the railroad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is, takes an act of God.
Yeah, that's what I'm like, I don't even want to go there. No chance.
So the plan of development is going to be a much larger conversation. Maybe we can try to like zoom through this super quick just to give people a better overview, and then we can revisit it on the 29th. If we are going to move forward with a consultant, I think we would need to make that decision then in
Yes.
order to keep the timeline for our plan of development. So if I give this to you real quick, I sent out a bunch of links to plans of developments of other communities. I didn't print them all out because some of them are very large documents. We would probably be looking at a shorter, more condensed 20-page version. But it'll give you a better idea. And I've pulled from those plans for some of these slides. This was a presentation that was given to our board and the community back in February to kind of give a better idea of what could be in a plan of development. So it's an official public document expressing a community vision for the downtown area. It's meant to be an enabling document, and any future projects taken on by the DDA must be included in the plan. So I think those are really the three essential pieces to understand.
So one of the things I think we really want to rely on a consultant for is to make sure we do not omit anything that we might want the next 30 years.
Totally.
Right. Right. And we've repeatedly been told you don't want it to be too narrow. When jets and skyways become a thing in 20 years, if we want TIF funding to go to that, we say we want to focus on multimodal transportation, right? You can include including but not limited to these projects. So if bike infrastructure is what you really want to focus on now, but you don't want to prohibit the jets and skyway, you can have bike infrastructure in there, but you leave it wider to focus on multimodal. Does that make sense? So public infrastructure and improvements can be part of the plan. These include, but are not limited to. So there's really a broad range. Workforce housing could be in there, community events, public gathering spaces, facades, utility improvements, playgrounds, plazas, multimodal transportation, parking structure, beautification, landscaping. So there's really a wide range. And again, it's just deciding what the DDA wants to potentially focus on in the next 30 years and make sure that it's included in some form or fashion. Business grant programs, business retention and attraction could be in there. So the Eagle plan of development, and I can resend these all out again, but this I believe was included in the documents and links that were sent. But they really focused on the strategic priorities of business community support, improving the regulatory environment. So I think Parks, this is what you've really been trying to get at in terms of working with the town. Communications, they really focused on developing a downtown brand identity for Eagle. They wanted to focus on an experience economy, having a lot of kind of events and active retail components downtown, access and mobility, creative placemaking, and partners and engagement. So those are the different areas of their plan. Downtown Longmont has a beautiful, very lengthy plan. Again, ours for 15,000 won't look like that. If we come up with 130,000 and want to put it towards it, you can get something like what Longmont's looks like. But economic vitality, placemaking and urban design, creative district, connectivity and access, land use, and then leadership and management. So within each of these topics, they have certain kind of subcategories and priorities that they choose to focus on. Netherlands plan, and I don't know if I included that one. I can send that one out because that one gives you another example of a more basic plan. I mean, it looks like a Word document more so than some of these glossy ones that like Longmont or Eaglewood has. They broke theirs into project areas. I believe they have 6 project areas. And they, I would say, in some ways do not follow the advice of keeping it very general. They seem to have pretty specific directions that I would envision coming more out of a work plan or priorities that come out of a plan of development. But it does kind of give you a nice example. This is one of their project areas, is First Commercial Street. So you can see the photo of what it looks like and then the renderings of what they envision. So really going up to that second story, improving walkability. They've got nice crosswalks and planters and sidewalks. So this is something you can see, but again, might be better suited for coming out as kind of priorities and action goals and steps from a plan that has a more general focus. And some of the plans do have both. They have more general areas and then more specific priorities. This is Inglewoods, and theirs is relatively new as well. This is from June 2021. So they focused on economy, jobs, and homes. So a focus on vacant storefronts, retaining and supporting small businesses, increasing downtown employment base, supporting housing and social services, marketing and programming. So again, that kind of brand identity and promotion of downtown and event coordination, public space enhancements and placemaking. So how to ensure that spaces are clean, safe, accessible, improving the pedestrian experience and physical environment through streetscape enhancements, mobility and transportation. So focusing on connectivity, they have their trolley in there and downtown parking supply, and then land use and urban design. So really identifying catalytic redevelopment sites, promoting best practices in urban design. Within each of these categories, there's an assessment of 2020 existing conditions, including strengths and weaknesses. And again, so this is a pretty involved plan. The consultant we're talking to actually referenced this one in terms of that it, spending a year and a half building it out. And then he's like, and then what do you do? Everyone's got plan fatigue. But it's quite comprehensive. So with the board and with our DDAC committee and the public, we propose a question of what would people like to see in a plan of development for Fraser. Again, this slide we talked about in our last meeting, but trying to really build upon the Fraser Downtown Strategic Plan, which has already identified some important areas of developing a vibrant town center, preserving and building upon Fraser's character, developing a diverse and resilient economy, increasing mobility choices, expanding and diversifying local housing options. And the board has prioritized some of these areas. So we talked about that and what is already kind of underway, but could maybe use continued support and moving forward, but present some opportunities. So some of the challenges that have been identified in Fraser, a lack of affordable housing and childcare, the high cost of construction and commercial development, poor walkability around town, lack of sidewalks, poor drainage on sidewalks that exist, limited public transit and rideshare options, parking, lacking aging infrastructure, limited public gathering spaces, trying to focus on how to better incentivize economic development and ensure business success, a focus on smart development and growth, ensuring preservation of the Fraser River and green spaces, retaining Fraser's character and how to pay for public improvements. Opportunities, really looking to implement programs and initiatives from that strategic plan, revitalizing the downtown area to increase visitor rates, upgrading streetscaping, improving that walkability, providing public art opportunities, public transit and bus stops, parking, better wayfinding and signage, creating public space for local events, enhancing access to the Fraser River, and really kind of enhancing that area in general, more community events, and finding ways to better support existing commercial development and businesses. Sorry, that got cut off there. So looking for ways to kind of beef up that business enhancement grants program that the town has. So we asked the public from that, coined by Michael, what is the frisson that people have for Fraser? And these are some of the things that came out of that conversation. I would envision that as part of this public or plan of development process, we would really try to have more engaging conversations around this. Sometimes you present these in board meetings and it takes a while to get some responses from people. But these were some of the areas that people really chose or provided as wanting to focus on: parking, enhancing the river access. Thank you. Downtown Merchants Association, so that kind of non-profit wing potentially, green and park space, workforce and family housing, affordable commercial space, and really finding ways to support local entrepreneurship came up as a need in Fraser. It's not only difficult to afford a house here, but to have commercial space and to start a business. Better traffic circulation, better bus service, parking areas, encouraging public transit versus just relying on individual car ownership and commuting, and then protecting and enhancing the community fabric.
Hey,
So
Sarah, and not to interrupt, I'm afraid I gotta run, take care of, help out my dad. One suggestion for a future meeting, if you all are interested, is I could give everybody a quick overview on where the Fraser Center effort is, where the fundraising is, et cetera. A few of you are familiar with that, but not everybody. And since it'll be an important part of economic development, it might be useful to just have the status quo in your head. So if you want that, y'all just let me know.
Great, thank you, Steve.
Good luck.
So we can come back to this in terms of the board's ideas, in terms of kind of buckets to look at for the plan of development and next steps. Again, we are in a tight time frame, so need to be able to move forward with an action item pretty quickly and let the consultants know if we do want to go that route. So for the next meeting, I would foresee having a motion to confirm that regular meeting time. It looks like Tuesdays, either at 9 or 10 a.m., second Tuesday of the month. We have adopted the bylaws. We have elected our officers. We'll bring forth an IGA with the town of Fraser, a draft of that to look at. And then really focusing on moving forward that plan of development. Once that happens, we can look at those operating plans, priority setting, some of those more short and medium term work plans and action items. And then we will need a budget for next year before the end of the year to put forth in front of the trustees for approval.
And I just wanted to share, I was interested in the marketing and website and logo stuff, just
Okay,
FYI.
great.
So,
Okay. I'll definitely make a note of that.
yeah.
So with that, Lori, perhaps you and I can connect and we can firm up an agenda for the next meeting and talk about some of the stuff between now and July 29th.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
I move to adjourn.
Second. Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
All in favor? All right.
Like,
Cool.
something that I'm going to do this meeting that occurs to me as we go through this exciting discussion